ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this 21st day of November 2022 and 26 degrees, and there is a slight chance of rain today, on and off as they reckon. Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, it's wonderful to have your company today on this 21st day of November, and what a weekend it was. Great weekend. We'll talk about many of the functions which took place. Well, first of all, the Queensland Multicultural Council had their annual dinner, and it was a great success with a completely sold out event. Second, we had this the Sahana Banerjee classical sitarist concert organized by Queensland Sangeet Mela Association. Another very successful packed house program, even though there were so many functions and events taking place right here in Brisbane. I'd say this weekend would have to be one of the busiest weekends function-wise in Brisbane within the Indian community and the wider community as well. So, it was just chockers. There's so many things happening. The show for San, there was the Brisbane concert, there was the dinner for Australia-India Club, and the Nasibo Live. There was another Qawwali function, and just to name a few. So, like I said, it was full on chockers with the number of functions and events. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what do we have for you today? Well, Prime Minister's back from overseas, and then after all the news update, we will have the Daily India report. So here's the news.
As world leaders farewell summit season, the Prime Minister declares diplomatic success.
Dialogue is a good thing,
including with the Chinese President Xi Jinping.
I think it exceeded expectations before the meeting was held.
The return of high-level diplomacy welcomed by the opposition, despite downplaying the impact.
Let's be realistic about the situation. It was only a few days before the meeting, as you know, that President Xi was dressed in his army fatigues, prepping his people for conflict.
Diplomacy credited for freeing Australian academic Sean Turnell, who languished in a Myanmar prison for nearly 2 years. Now he's free, the opposition wants sanctions.
We cannot turn a blind eye to the thousands of other individuals who are detained in Myanmar.
We'll make decisions in Australia's national interest.
The Prime Minister will face a more familiar challenge when Parliament returns tomorrow, including a potential legislative logjam, from establishing a National Anti-Corruption Commission to overhauling industrial relations and preventing a catastrophic rise in power prices.
The government will continue to do whatever it can to take the sting out of some of these pressures.
Market intervention promised by Christmas as the fight on workplace laws intensifies.
Stop these radical industrial relations changes right now.
We need to fix the bargaining system, particularly for the low-paid.
The bill's fate rests with the crossbench, which worries change is being rushed.
If it's necessary to take a little bit of extra time, then we're prepared to do that.
A potential concession after a week of diplomacy. Henry Bello, ABC News.
So the laws need to be upheld, and if it takes a little bit extra time, as our Treasurer has mentioned, that give it a little bit more time. Well, right now to the other breaking news is the elections in Victoria, the first post-COVID election. So what are the factors that would be defining this election?
At the top of Collins Street, outside the state government offices, there are 4 statues of Victorian premiers who served for more than 3,000 days.
If Daniel Andrews wins Saturday's election, he gets his own statue here. And for much of his second term in office, it's been pretty widely assumed that a third term would be his for the taking.
Since 1982, Labor has won 8 out of 11 of the state elections. It has presided over Spring Street for 2/3 of that time.
And this is a state that was once described as the jewel in the crown for the Liberal Party. It's now the jewel in the crown for the Labor Party.
At the last election, Daniel Andrews increased his majority, pitching Labor's big infrastructure build against a badly judged law and order campaign from the Liberals. The opposition dumped its leader, Matthew Guy, then, when things didn't get better, brought him back again. Meanwhile, the pandemic turned Daniel Andrews and other state premiers into national figures and powerful voices in the new National Cabinet.
He's arguably the most powerful Premier in Australia.
marching side by side onto the healthcare front line.
They were dealing with sort of daily issues that were sort of embedded in people's lives in a way that reminds us, I think, of just how important state government is.
Guys, right to go?
I just like him. I know he's controversial.
Keep everybody safe and trying his best.
But in a state that had the longest lockdowns in the country, there's been no leader so reviled as Daniel Andrews. Yesterday saw the ugliest moment of the campaign yet, when a candidate from the Angry Victorians party called for the Premier to be turned into a red mist.
I don't think we've had a Premier in Victoria who has been so dominant and larger than life since Jeff Kennett.
It was Jeff Kennett who came up with the idea for these statues. Now, at the time, he was headed towards what he and a lot of other people thought would be his third term in office. But it didn't happen that way. He was blindsided by a backlash from Country Victoria, which felt neglected and very angry.
This time, polling suggests it's Melbourne's outer growth suburbs that are feeling that way, where the big infrastructure build has been slow to arrive and where anger over lockdowns still simmers.
Daniel Prick Andrews. I don't like him. I couldn't trust him.
There have been scandals over branch stacking and misuse of funds, especially in the Labor Party. But both leaders are facing anti-corruption investigations.
I've done nothing wrong.
For a governing party to be held to account, it's got to be held to account by an effective opposition, and I think the opposition has got credibility problems on this particular front.
This week, Matthew Guy's campaign ran into even deeper trouble from rogue Liberal candidates with ultra-conservative views on race and sexuality. In 4 years, Victoria's debt will be bigger than New South Wales, Queensland and Tasmania's combined.
I think, the sheer enormity of those debt numbers are just starting to dawn on people. I'm actually not convinced that the parties have calibrated their election commitments to that new environment.
Here's something else to ponder. When Jeff Kennett lost back in 1999, it was 3 country independents who held the balance of power in the Parliament and delivered government to Steve Bracks and Labor. Now this time there's polling that suggests if Labor's going to lose votes, it may not be to the Liberals but to independents, and here in Inner Melbourne, to the Greens. And that's something every political operative in the country is going to be watching.
Whether the new norm is insurgency, whether the new norm is volatility, whether the major parties are now faced with a splintering of their constituencies, expanded cross-benches, much more volatility, and force a change in politics, force the major parties to adapt to a new reality.
Coming to terms with the new reality, it is interesting to see what's going to happen. Well, how are the voters feeling in Richmond? Let's talk to some.
We are in Inner Melbourne, in the seat of Richmond. Think suburbs like Fitzroy, Collingwood, Clifton Hill and of course Richmond. Now this area has been Labor held since 1908, but the Greens have been coming for Labor over the past few elections and they think with the retiring sitting MP they might have a crack this time. Both sides are putting lots of resources into this seat. Let's go and chat to some voters. Just wondering if you know who this is?
Dan Andrews.
Okay. Dan Andrews. And do you know who that is?
No. No.
Andrew? Yeah, Daniel Andrews. Do you know who this guy is?
I'm not sure this one.
Just wondering if you know who that is.
Yeah, Dan Andrews.
Yep. And do you know who that is?
Unfortunately, yeah. Mr. Guy.
I just saw an ad down there, the Greens member must be.
Yep. Gabrielle Duvietri, the Greens candidate for Richmond. How about this?
No.
That's the Labor candidate, Lauren O'Dwyer.
Right, yeah.
So what are the kinds of issues that you think are going to be important?
Cost of living is probably the biggest one for me, I think.
Climate change is a huge one.
We're in the healthcare industry, so we see a lot in terms of what the government's going to do for healthcare, how it affects our particular industry. I think is probably a main thing.
Bit of a firm Green voter. Because of their policies regarding climate change, regarding social values.
And what do you think of those two men?
I'm quite happy for Dan Andrews to keep on going.
Traditionally been Labor voters, mainly because they seem to, and I think during COVID times they've had things quite tough. I think they did relatively well, all things considered.
Yeah, I'll be voting Greens.
Okay, and why is that?
Because they
Their
support
policies.
environmental policies. They've got the future of Australia in mind.
I would probably vote for the current Premier, to be honest.
Why is that?
I just like him. I know he's controversial and I know COVID, interesting, but I kind of feel like he's a bit of a safe pair of hands.
The way that Daniel Andrews handled the pandemic is a good thing.
Yeah, it's good, man, before, and that's why. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're happy.
Thank you.
Chatting.
Bye.
So there you are. There's the voter sentiments out there on the street in Richmond. And, well, right now, Lauren O'Dwyer describes herself as the Potter woman contesting for the seat of Richmond.
I'm Lauren O'Dwyer, Labor for Richmond. I'm a lesbian single mum, a renter, director in the arts, footy coach and a proud Yorta Yorta woman.
Lauren O'Dwyer, Nagatha Yorta Yorta Winya Ngana. I'm a Yorta Yorta woman and mother, and I am the Labor candidate for Richmond in the upcoming state election.
Nagatha Lauren O'Dwyer, Nagatha Yorta Yorta Winya Ngana. My name is Lauren O'Dwyer and I'm a Yorta Yorta woman and mother. It's important to me to continue to reclaim the language of my ancestors and matriarchs further north, because just as our language has been stolen from us, as has my colour, and that is how we continue to move towards reconciliation in this great country, particularly within southeastern Australia.
And wishing her all the very best with the campaign. That's a very, very good and very strong. Well, right now, let's go to Canberra. Where the Nigerian community are embracing ping pong.
Even the warm-ups were intense as players faced off ping pong bat to ping pong bat.
I think a good table tennis player is someone that can spin the ball very well and has a very versatile style of play.
Having that attention to detail, eye to the ball.
Not that many of the champions admitted to much training, but last year's winner was still hopeful of his own chances.
I believe the competition is more intense than it was last year. So many people wanted to take the title away from me.
I will be surprised personally if he manages to cling on to it.
Last year there were 60 to 70 games, but this year there were nearly 90 as the tournament has gained momentum.
And I really hope that one day one of the boys playing here will represent Australia at the Olympics.
For now, this young champion only rates himself as an intermediate player, although he was optimistic about the tournament.
I think that I have quite a good chance of winning this year.
But last year's female champion has already had something of a rude awakening, coming in second.
I heard people have been talking about what happened last year, and some people got practicing, and so more people joined the competition this year.
Well, there is always next year. Elizabeth Byrne, ABC News.
There is always next year, but winning is winning and keeping up with that. So the competition is getting intense with more people taking lots of interest in the game. Well, that's good to see. Well, right now we'll go to New South Wales and the flood situation. Millions of dollars worth of produce are being destroyed in the floods.
No time for tears over spilled milk. 100,000 litres dumped after floods cut off Alex Bailey's Forbes dairy farm.
We were unable to get a milk truck in. This is day 14. We've had to tip the milk down. It's just floating down the river.
While her income has dried up, the workload has not.
Pretty hard because you can't just not milk the cows. You have to get milk twice a day and get nothing for it.
Across the region, extreme measures protect lives and livelihoods as animals are lifted to safety. While quad bikes corral cattle to higher ground. On the road, farmers swap stories of the worst flooding of a generation.
Damage-wise, got no idea. That's if it dries out so we can get on it.
The emotional side of it will kick in down the track once you sort of have a chance to evaluate where you're up to and what's actually in front of you.
This region's been hit twice in 2 weeks. The small town of Eugowra was almost washed away. Kim Story was airlifted from her sheep farm on Monday. She returned to a farm destroyed.
God. So I had
All sheep yards there. It's an all too familiar sight, not just here but in regions across Australia. These ongoing weather events are set to increase pain at the checkout and slash exports.
And we're seeing very big impacts on everything from wheat and barley crops and canola through to dairy and sheep industries as well, and that is inevitably going to have an impact on the national economy.
A crisis hurting farmers and everyone who relies on them. Molly Gorman, ABC.
And of course, everyone that relies on that will have a national impact. Of course, once the farming, and it is such a sad thing to see that so many thousands of liters of milk just down the drain, as they say. But what do you do? Because they have the use by it until they get to the processing plants. Well, right now, let's go to Manly. Voters in Manly are going to decide to keep riding the teal wave.
All the hallmarks of a campaign.
The best image quality.
The Premier examining the government's $800 million extension to the Prince of Wales Hospital.
This is a significant part of what our government has been about. But it's not about building infrastructure. Infrastructure doesn't mean anything to anyone. It's what it is at the end of it.
While Dominic Perrottet was with the Liberal candidate in the Labor-held seat of Coogee,
ready, guys?
The opposition leader was unveiling Labor's candidate, a doctor, in the Liberal electorate of Ryde.
Healthcare isn't provided by buildings, it's provided by the people that work in those buildings.
Federally, the area made the switch from Liberal to Labor in May.
One election won't necessarily preordain the result in the next, and voters will make their own decisions about the circumstances on the ground.
Voters in Manly will have to decide whether they continue to ride the teal wave. The Climate 200 group has backed a challenger to the Environment Minister, James Griffin.
What's important to me is stronger action on climate change, more integrity in politics, and I want to make sure that the community voice is truly heard and spoken about on the Parliament floor.
Already Mr Griffin appears aware of the competition. The government is seemingly confident it's neutralised some teal voter concerns with its record on the environment and by delivering a female-focused budget in June. But the Liberal Party hasn't sorted all its women's issues, including female representation, which remains low, leaving it vulnerable.
It's obviously helpful to have the more women in the Parliament. But would you do that to the exclusion of getting good people in?
The outgoing Health Minister's seat of Wakehurst on the Northern Beaches, as well as Pittwater next door, are also likely to have teal candidates. Ashley Raper, ABC News, Sydney.
Yes, my take on that is that everyone should be given an equal opportunity. It doesn't mean that there should be an equal number of seats pre-allocated. The best person wins, everyone wins, and women should be allowed to contest on the same basis as men. And if chosen, they are in. So that's the thing. It's up to the voters to decide who they want as their representative. It is their choice. That's what true democracy is. Well, right now, going on to Western Australia, where the government is set to modernise the state's abortion laws.
When the US Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade earlier this year, it meant their right to abortion was gone. The issue resonated in Australia, where roadblocks remain to accessing abortions, especially for women in the regions.
The overturning of Roe v. Wade in the US has drawn a lot of awareness around the need not only to consider our laws but to protect our laws.
It sparked criticism in WA, where abortion falls under the criminal code, but the government is now wanting to change that.
The WA health system will look after WA women and that they don't have to travel to the Northern Territory or another jurisdiction in order to get an abortion where required.
They've promised to introduce legislation early next year to fully decriminalise abortion and improve access. Any potential legislation is expected to cause division beyond the political divide.
I imagine it will be a conscience vote, and while I personally will support the reforms, I imagine there will be different views on both sides regarding this matter.
There will be a conscience vote on that in the Parliament. It's been traditionally the case.
But before then, the government is seeking feedback on proposed changes from women and stakeholders, leaving the door open for some public input. Kason Ho, ABC News.
Conscious about it will be, but it will, will be interesting to see what comes out of that. Well, right now, moving on for the last local segment, we'll go to South Australia, where thousands have been left without power in that severe.
The state smashed by wild winds and heavy rainfall again.
The storm damage through our state has been extraordinary, and this is only, I think, the 5th time that we have been in island mode because of a downed interconnector.
A week on from last weekend's vicious storm, the state's damaged interconnector near Tailem Bend is still not fixed. While one of the 2 broken circuits has been restored, the line to Victoria is only running at 20% capacity. Another vigorous cold front over the past 48 hours has delayed further repair works, meaning that South Australia remains largely cut off from the national electricity grid.
The best advice that I've got is Monday.
That timeline has now been pushed back again, with Electronet saying the interconnector will be up and running by Tuesday. Downed power lines yesterday and overnight saw more than 13,000 homes and businesses plunged into darkness.
Oh, well, all day, like from, say, 3 o'clock in the morning till now, it's still out.
Crews have worked throughout the day to restore power, but close to 2,000 customers in the Riverland are likely to remain in the dark for another day.
We want to be very clear, restoration is going to be unlikely until late today, and look, my guess is there will be some without power tomorrow, but there is a large volume of work there and quite a bit of distance to travel.
We're getting into a very important time of year for South Australian businesses. We need to be assured that the...
Well, so there we are, even in today's day and age, these things do happen, power shortages, and people are suffering with that shortages. And the thing is that people want the power restored. They want the power restored now. And of course, the workers, the relief workers are doing the best that they can. Well, right now, before we go to our Daily India report, let's take a look at this report where Elon Musk, while he has been checking a lot of stuff, has reinstated Donald Trump's Twitter account.
Until a week ago, Melissa's job was ridding Twitter of misinformation and abuse. She's appalled someone banned for exactly those things will now be allowed back.
It's extremely dangerous that he's even being considered to be let back on.
But the new billionaire boss has declared the people have spoken after a poll on his website found a slim majority were in favour of Donald Trump's return. The former president's page is already live, although he doesn't seem keen to use it just yet, his last tweet dating back to the Capitol riots in January 2021.
But I hear we're getting a big vote to also go back on Twitter. I don't see it because I don't see any reason for it.
While Musk's ownership is good news for Trump, it's bad news for people like Melissa. Her primary income now is teaching data science online. She says the mass layoffs at Twitter leave the company vulnerable.
But it's just like building maintenance. If you suddenly fired all the building maintenance people, the building would be fine for a while, but there's nobody to clean your toilets. There's nobody to replace outlets when they go out and loose railings. And over time, it becomes more and more disheveled.
Even in the history of mass layoffs, this has got to be the worst one that I can think of. I think Elon Musk has been outrageous in his behavior. He's been disrespectful. He's been cruel.
A major test of Twitter's now skeletal staff will be the FIFA World Cup, which historically drives a huge amount of traffic. It's expected to stress Twitter systems and stretch a workforce that's been so heavily reduced. San Francisco is the heart of Silicon Valley, but it's been economically battered by recent layoffs at major tech firms, and the pain isn't over yet, with Elon Musk expected to announce further cuts imminently. Carrington Clark, ABC News, San Francisco.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now it's time to go to our Daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you reports, interviews, features and more on India and the Indian diaspora. India has delivered a joint statement on behalf of G4 countries at the UN General Assembly underlining the broad support for reforms in the UN Security Council. India on November 17th delivered a joint statement on behalf of G4 countries at the United Nations General Assembly on equitable representation of the UN Security Council. Underlining the broad support for reforms in the Security Council, Ruchira Kamboj, India's permanent representative to the UN, said that longer the reform is stalled, the greater its deficit in representation. She said it is also important to bear in mind that during this year's high-level week, including the general debate of the 77th General Assembly, more than 70 heads of state and government and high-level governmental representatives underlined that reforming the Security Council should be one of our priorities during this session. This broad support for this topic confirms its relevance and urgency. The longer the Security Council reform is stalled, the greater its deficit in representation. And representation is an inescapable precondition for its legitimacy and effectiveness, she added. G4 countries, Brazil, Germany, India and Japan support each other's bids for permanent seats on the United Nations Security Council. The senior diplomat stressed it is high time to bring the Security Council in line with its charter responsibility to act on behalf of the entire membership. India reiterated G4's position on the need for a single consolidated text and for renewed working methods to bring about an open, inclusive and transparent process with webcasting, record keeping and the application of the rules of procedure of the General Assembly. India and Russia, along with 12 other countries, asked the US to unfreeze Afghanistan's bloc assets. India, along with 13 other countries, has asked the US to unfreeze Afghanistan's assets in order to help its economy, which has collapsed since the Taliban takeover of Kabul last year. The matter was discussed in the fourth meeting of Moscow format talks led by Russia on November 16th. The US, however, did not participate in the talks and nor any representative of the Taliban was present. Apart from India and Russia, other countries which took part in the talks were China, Pakistan, Iran, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. Representatives of Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia and Turkey were also present. The participating countries also told the Taliban that establishing military infrastructure facilities of third countries in Afghanistan is unacceptable. The countries also asked the Taliban to not allow Afghanistan to serve as a breeding ground, safe haven or source of proliferation for terrorism and condemned the terror attacks targeting innocent civilians at public places, including educational institutes and the recent attack at the Russian embassy in Kabul. Amid growing concerns over security, India and New Zealand are reviewing their defence policy. Their respective navies have also signed a pact on wide shipping information exchange. New Zealand's High Commissioner to India, David Pine, called on Indian Defence Secretary Giridhar Aramane in New Delhi on November 17th. Recently, Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, called for a new review of its defence policy amid the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. The review also takes account of a recent controversy over China's aggressive postures towards Australia and tactical alliance with the Solomon Islands. The New Zealand Defence Force is gearing up for the modernisation drive and building capabilities in the Pacific against such threats. Building upon the security cooperation, navies of both the countries have signed a pact on wide shipping information exchange. An agreement on wide shipping information exchange will boost naval cooperation. As India takes over G20 presidency from December 1st, 4 cities in the state of Uttar Pradesh are gearing up to host multiple events during the summit in September next year. As the G20 presidency was handed over to India by Indonesia at the end of the summit of the bloc's leaders in Bali, Uttar Pradesh's state Agra, Lucknow, Varanasi and Noida are bucking up to host multiple events linked to G20 2023. India will formally assume the G20 presidency charge on December 1st. According to sources, Agra will be hosting a 2-day meeting of the G20 countries on September 9th and 10th, 2023, for which the local administration has already started preparations. The delegates of G20 nations could visit the Taj Mahal, Agra Fort, Sikandra and Fatehpur Sikri. The ASI has received a letter from the Union Foreign Ministry regarding the intended visit by G20 delegates to these monuments, with instructions to ensure that the arrangements at these monuments are up to the mark. There are about 200 events planned all over the country during the G20 summit, of which the meeting of the cultural group is expected to be held in Agra. The G20 meeting will highlight Agra and its monuments on the world stage, and it could bring considerable revenue to the city's tourist trade. India is fast emerging as the medical tourism hub of the world, with demands for medical visas increasing each year. India's Science and Technology Minister Dr. Jitendra Singh has said that the country is fast emerging as the medical tourism hub of the world. He said more than 1 million medical visas were issued to foreigners between 2019 and 2022. Addressing an event in New Delhi, the minister said the healthcare sector in the country is expected to grow to $50 billion in the next 3 years. He said the global medical tourism market is estimated to be worth about $72 billion and the country's share in medical tourism is expected to be around $10 billion by next year. He said the country has around 600 hospitals that provide world-class treatment in a cost-effective manner. Highlighting the role of technology in the medical sector, Dr. Jitendra Singh pointed out that the world recognized the country's leadership role during the COVID pandemic as it achieved the rare feat of delivering over 220 crore vaccinations through a fully digital platform, CoWIN. He said there are over 4,000 health tech startups in the country. He also expressed the hope that this ecosystem will grow further in the future. Indian equity indices opened higher after closing in red, snapping a two-day bullish rally. Indian equity markets opened higher on November 18's early morning trade amid mixed global cues and softened crude oil prices. Key indices Nifty 50 climbed over 30 points to trade above 18,350 levels, whereas the S&P BSE Sensex rose over 50 points to trade at 61,833 levels. The strength spilled across broader markets as Nifty Mid Cap 100 and Nifty Small Cap 100 advanced up to 0.3%. The volatility index, India VIX, meanwhile slipped over 1%. All sectors moved both ways, making gains and losses, while Nifty Metal, Nifty Media and Nifty IT started to trade with marginal gains. Nifty FMCG, Nifty Pharma and Nifty Auto indices were bogged down in trade. Among individual stocks, shares of Nykaa gained over 3% after TPG Capital offloaded shares worth 1,000 crores via a block deal. Besides, shares of PTC India Financial Services surged over 4% after the company reported a multi-fold jump in net profit to 129.98 crores in the March quarter. Analysts stated that earnings performance, inflation trajectory and FII flows would be the key factors determining the mood of the equity markets over the next few months. The key domestic indices on November 17 witnessed modest losses. Both indices declined amid negative cues from global share markets. The Sensex fell 230 points and closed near 61,750 points, while the Nifty slipped 66 points and settled below the 18,350 level. India's famous Sabarimala Lord Ayyappa temple has opened for the annual pilgrimage season. Thousands of devotees braved heavy rain for darshan or praying to their revered deity. Sabarimala Lord Ayyappa temple in Kerala was opened at 5 p.m. on November 16 for the annual pilgrimage season. Braving heavy rain, thousands thronged Sannidhanam since afternoon for darshan. Heavy rain, which began at 3:30 p.m. and continued till 7 p.m., caused hardships for devotees at Pampa, Sannidhanam and the trekking path. During the 41-day long Mandala Puja season, which gets over on December 27, the temple will open for darshan at 3 a.m. and close at 1 p.m. and reopen at 4 p.m. and close at 11 p.m. North India will experience cold conditions in the coming days as northwesterly winds coming from the Himalayas are expected to bring down temperatures further. The India Meteorological Department has said that some parts of North India are expected to experience cold conditions in the coming days. The northwesterly winds coming from the Himalayas to the Gangetic Plains are expected to bring down temperatures in the areas. IMD said that the western Himalayan region is likely to receive mild to moderate rainfall and snowfall over the next few days. The temperature in national capital Delhi is expected to gradually drop starting November 19th. During the past week, several areas of Himachal Pradesh received widespread snowfall and extreme cold climatic conditions. Snowfall occurred in Lahore, Spiti, Manali and other higher areas. In Jammu and Kashmir, Pahalgam and Gulmarg experienced snowfall and cold conditions. In the south, Thiruvananthapuram will have a generally cloudy sky with 1 or 2 spells of rain or thunder showers. In the northeast, Assam and Tripura will have fog or mist in the morning but mainly clear sky. The temperature in these northeastern states will vary between 8 and 31 degrees Celsius. The Chandni Bar fame director Madhur Bhandarkar's film based on the 21 days of the COVID pandemic lockdown in India titled India Lockdown is ready for release on OTT. The trailer of the film was released by OTT platform ZEE5 on November 17th. OTT platform ZEE5 dropped the trailer of Madhur Bhandarkar's India Lockdown on November 17th. The film is based on the initial days of the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic when the government called for a 21-day lockdown across the country. The trailer will send shivers down your spine as it recreates the horrors of the time when it was plain chaotic. Written by Amit Joshi and Aradhana Shah with Madhur Bhandarkar, the film will explore the lives of 4 characters and how the unforeseen situation causes turbulence in their lives. The trailer relives the early March 2020 days as everyone tried to grasp the new normal. The empty roads, people marched and authorities in PPE kits, the visuals seem like watching your worst dreams come alive. Through the trailer, Bhandarkar touches upon the varied emotions as the 4 narratives move ahead parallelly. The horrifying visuals of migrant workers, including their young children, walking on roads like cattle continue to haunt us. Pratik Babbar and Sai Tamhankar play a migrant worker couple who are left jobless during the lockdown. With no means of transport, they are forced to walk back to their hometown, facing more troubles on the way. While Ahana Kumra plays a pilot who for the first time experiences downtime, compelling her to introspect. India Lockdown is set to premiere at IFFI Goa on November 21st. Starting December 2nd, India Lockdown will stream on Z5.
आपको आपके टिकट का रिफंड मिल जाएगा। पूरी देश में लॉकडाउन लग गई है। मैं हैदराबाद नहीं जा सकता। कैसी घोर भसड़ है रे बंधु, कैसी घोर भसड़ है।
That's all for this bulletin of the Daily India Report.
Thank you very much, Ankita, for that. And from PIO TV, we are wishing Munish Gupta a speedy recovery as he is in hospital in Delhi after he had a bit of a fall in the weekend. So wishing him the best. I hope he recovers very, very quickly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now it's time to take a look at the functions and events taking place right here in Brisbane and see what events are on. Ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have time for you in this segment today. It's been wonderful having your company on the 21st day of November 2022. 26 degrees here in Brisbane and mostly cloudy, it says, but I can't see no more cloud out at the moment. It is a little bit overcast, but not very cloudy. So there you are, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us.